Welcome to Ian Review Sports. My name is Ian McNaughton. Thank you for joining us. This video will be discussing the 2021 French Grand Prix from Paul Ricard, and then the other video we'll have coming out later today will be on kind of UFC, some boxing stuff, kind of like some fights that happened over the weekend. And then I'm recording this Monday morning, Monday, June 21st. Later today, we're going to have a new Speak Your Piece podcast out with Scott Conkin, SYP creator Scott, and myself. So be sure to check out, if you haven't already seen the other video, go check out the other video. If you haven't seen the podcast yet, go check out the podcast later on Monday. It should be some really good stuff. So I'll start with the F1 race. It took place at La Castellet Circuit Paul Ricard. Really fun race from beginning to end. It wasn't as boring as I thought it was going to be, as I think we all thought it was going to be. Max Verstappen was on pole. Lewis Hamilton was starting second. Lance Stroll had to start from the back because he did not set a time in Q1 within 107% of the fastest lap. Yuki Tsunoda started from the pit lane because they changed the floor on his car. So pretty much Tsunoda started from the back. Stroll is also starting from the back, but Tsunoda starting in pit lane. Stroll's just starting from the back of the pack. Verstappen loses control on turn 2 of the opening lap, giving up the lead to Hamilton. I don't know if he locked up or if he just lost control or what happened, but Verstappen just lost control. He went off the track, came back on, only gave up a spot. Not the judges, but the FIA thought that was all right. No other problems, no other issues with that. Lap 9, Daniel Ricciardo passes Fernando Alonso for 8th on the chicane, and then Norris passes Alonso on the long hairpin right after Ricciardo. So pretty much Ricciardo used DRS on Alonso. Norris had DRS on Ricciardo, but because Ricciardo already made the pass on Alonso, Norris still had that extra DRS that he used to go around Alonso. So really smart moves by the McLarens early on. Leclerc is the first to pit, as the undercut was the expected move to make. It was the highly thought of move to make coming into the race, although it didn't actually help Ferrari in this race. Daniel Ricciardo pits on lap 17 to undercut Gasly and AlphaTauri. And not only that, as Carlos Sainz and Gasly both have slowish pit stops, Sainz 2.2 pit stop, 2.7 seconds, Gasly 3.1. Ricciardo passes both of them as they're coming out of the pit lane on lap 18. So not only does the undercut work to perfection against Pierre Gasly, it works tremendously well against Carlos Sainz. Verstappen pits on the start of lap 19. His pit time was 2.3 seconds, so he got the undercut on Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton pits at the end of lap 19 with a better pit stop time than Verstappen. Hamilton's pit stop was 2.2 seconds compared to Verstappen's 2.3, tenth of a second quicker. But pit lane limits with the speeds and all that are tougher at France because it's 60 kilometers, not 80 kilometers, I think, usually, which allows Verstappen to pass Hamilton as Hamilton's leaving the pit lane. Verstappen just gets by him on turn 1. Great job by Max Verstappen working the undercut and getting around Lewis Hamilton. Lap 28, Pierre Gasly dives in on Lando Norris, forcing both to go wide. More Gasly wide. Gasly went more wide than Norris did, but Gasly was able to get back onto the track with no issues. Same with Norris. Pretty much Norris returns the favor later on by passing him on the chicane. So pretty much Norris just puts Gasly in a weird spot because there's not a lot of room for Gasly. He kind of just boxes him out, and then Norris gets around him. Norris passes Leclerc on lap 30, then Gasly passes Leclerc. Just a bad day for the Ferraris all around. Verstappen pits on lap 32, going for medium tires while everyone else is on the hard tires. So, but they're hoping Red Bull is hoping by the end of this, they'll be on fresher mediums compared to Mercedes being on old hard tires. Ricciardo swapped positions with Norris on lap 33. Norris had fresher tires than Ricciardo did. Lap 44, Verstappen uses DRS to get close to Bottas, not quite enough to pass him on the chicane, but Bottas locks up. He kind of did what Verstappen did earlier, lost control, a little bit of a lockup, was out of position, giving Verstappen room to side draft Bottas and then eventually pass him later on the long hairpin. Perez passes Bottas on lap 49 with a nice slipstream. Verstappen then passes Lewis Hamilton with a lap and a half to go for his, I think, third victory of the season for Max Verstappen. So congratulations to Max Verstappen for getting the job done. Verstappen finishes first. Hamilton finishes second. Perez finishes third. Bottas finishes fourth. And then Lando Norris finishes fifth. So it was, for Red Bull, it was a great day. You couldn't have asked for anything better. You basically did what Mercedes had been doing to you for a while, and you pulled it on them. You went for this second pit stop with the fresher medium tires, and it worked. It worked out to perfection. Even getting Perez on the podium instead of Bottas, tremendous move. Great job by the Red Bull team to make that happen. For Mercedes, it's a disappointing weekend because you wanted to make up some ground this weekend. You thought this was a place, if you qualified well enough, you can make up some ground on Red Bull, and you didn't really. You didn't make up any ground when it came to. You didn't make up any ground when it came to the actual race. Qualifying, you didn't really make any ground up there either. And now you're behind even further in the points. Not great stuff, really. Luckily, this is the first race of a triple header. So we have another race this upcoming weekend in Austria, another race the week after in Australia. So we got a bunch of good races coming up. But disappointing weekend for Mercedes. McLaren had a really good weekend. McLaren looked really fast, especially Ricciardo was giving his all, which is nice. He's had good performances. He hasn't had great performances. Like, instead of top fives, he's had top tens, and he was. They mentioned it in the race about how they're trying to become a team, and like a good team move by Ricciardo letting Norris pass. Norris kind of has a better car than Ricciardo, and I just think from the McLaren perspective, this was a good weekend. There's a lot you can build off this past weekend, a lot to look forward to in Austria these next 2 weekends, where Lando Norris has a podium finish in his career. So some good stuff from this past weekend, and likely on the way for McLaren. Ferrari had a really bad weekend. I played Charles Leclerc in fantasy, and I think he finished 15th, 16th. He had a really underwhelming finish because he went for the two-stop, which it didn't really help him. It didn't really add anything for Ferrari. Sainz, I think, got a top 10 finish, but barely. It was very underwhelming, very disappointing with how this weekend was for Ferrari, because they've been on a roll these last few weeks. Their qualifying pace is really good, especially for Charles Leclerc, and just nothing this past weekend. This past weekend just didn't go at all as planned. So that's something to keep in mind in the next couple of races as well. I don't think Austria is going to be a faster track than France. I think they will perform better in Austria than they did in France. And I just I was just so disappointed and so surprised, because I didn't think that's where Ferrari was going to struggle. I thought Ferrari would struggle at other places, but considering they didn't manage their tires well, there was a lot of degradation to the car. They'll figure out it, I'm sure, in the next couple of weeks. But tough weekend for Ferrari. AlphaTauri, another good weekend for Pierre Gasly. Obviously, he got called an effing idiot by Lando Norris. I mean, Yuki almost got to the top 10, which was pretty cool, considering he had to start from pit lane. So that was a good performance from him. I think AlphaTauri, again, they're still working on stuff. They're still improving on stuff. Like they're close to being a top 5 team, but I think they're closer to the Aston Martins and the Alpines than they are the McLarens and the Ferraris. They're getting close, but they're not quite there yet. And this was a really good weekend, I think, for Pierre Gasly, for Yuki Tsunoda. I think AlphaTauri is showing that they have a lot of speed in their cars, and their drivers are very talented. I think Yuki and Pierre Gasly are both extremely talented. And for Yuki, he's still figuring out the car. He's still figuring it all out. And now you've added a new floor to him, so that's something else that he has to consider for racing. So not a bad performance from AlphaTauri. I'd take it if I were them. I'd be very happy with it. Could have been a lot worse. It could have been a Ferrari, and you could have just been struggling for the whole race and getting caught up in the pack. In terms of Aston Martin, again, Vettel was in the top 10 for most of the race. He had a good day. Lance Stroll, I was talking about it with my dad. I was watching the race with him yesterday, and he said, man, it would be a really good day if Stroll could get into the top 10 after starting from not quite the back, because I guess Yuki started from the pit lane, but still back of the grid. And Stroll pretty much did that. I think he finished either 10th or 11th. He had a really good day, a really good race. Again, similarly to AlphaTauri, where they're figuring it out. They've had a couple of good races, especially Vettel, who had second in Baku, and now he got another top 10 finish here. They're figuring it out. They're slowly getting it. Their car is obviously it's not as good as last year's, I don't think. The drivers are still, I think, figuring out the car. I think Vettel is still kind of getting used to the car. I mean, he got a second place finish, so he must have a pretty good idea of how it works. Stroll, I think he's still figuring it out a little bit. I'm sure he was a bit concerned with the whole Pirelli tire incident in Baku, and I'm sure that's still on the back of your mind when you crash like he did. I'm sure you still think about it, but overall, a solid weekend for Aston Martin, and it's okay weekend for Alpine, because Alonso got passed a few times. He passed a few people. Alonso, I think he also had a top 10 finish, so he was fine this weekend. I can't complain too much about Alonso. Esteban Ocon was okay. I was hoping for more in his home Grand Prix, and it just didn't happen. He was hovering outside of the top 10 for most of the race. I don't know what position he finished exactly, but he was, I don't want to say disappointing, underwhelming a little bit for sure. Again, they could have a much better weekend these next couple of weekends in Austria, where the circuit should be much faster. But still a really fun team, and still an improving team. Like, they're still figuring it out as well. So I can't be too upset with Alpine. I'm sure if you asked them, they would have liked to perform better, especially with Ferrari struggling like they did. But you're not going to make them all perfect. So we'll see how it goes for them in the next couple of races here in Austria. Alfa Romeo, not a lot I can say about them. Antonio Giovinazzi, okay. Kimi Räikkönen, okay. They weren't really in play for points. I thought they were. I think it was Giovinazzi who was hovering outside of points for most of the weekend. I didn't think either one of them were going to be stealing a top 10 finish. They didn't. So not a lot to say about Alfa Romeo. Not a lot to say about Haas or Williams. I think now the conversation now for Williams is Nicholas Latifi. Who are the drivers for next season? Who are the drivers if you're Williams? Because George Russell is, I can't imagine George Russell is going to be back for another year with Williams. I'm not saying he's going to the Mercedes yet. I'm just saying I don't know that Russell would go back to Williams for another year. I just don't see it happening. Latifi has been very bland, very meh, like not doing enough to get points on the board. He just goes out, finishes in Q1, goes for the race, and finishes 18th, and that's Nicholas Latifi's weekend. I'm sure Williams, now that they got a bit more financial backing and support, there might be interest to go out and get a new driver. It could be somebody like Valtteri Bottas, who's been discussed. They might want to bring up like Jack Aitken. He might be somebody from F2 who they'd be interested in. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. I have no idea what direction that Williams is going to go in. I just know that Williams is going to need to is now probably thinking about who they want driving for them next season. It's not going to be George Russell, and it's probably not going to be like Nicholas Latifi. Haas, obviously, they're Haas. Mick Schumacher's fine. He had some good moments this weekend, chatting with Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel. Nikita Mazepin sucks. I can't explain it to you any other way than that. I am still saying that Mazepin sucks, even though Schumacher crashed in qualifying. I'm still saying that. I'm not afraid to say that. That's Ian Review Sports with the 2021 French Grand Prix. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Be sure to get some new Speak Your Piece hoodies. They're on sale now. You can DM us on Instagram or Twitter, and we can get you set up with sizing and cost for hoodies. Again, if you haven't already, be sure to watch some of our other videos that are coming out. And then be sure to check out the podcast that comes out later today on Monday. You can follow me on Instagram, ian.mcnaughton. You can follow Speak Your Piece on Instagram at SpeakYourPiece. Good stuff here. Thank you very much for watching. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace out.